At time of recording, we are just a few short days away from the release of The Mandalorian and Grogu, the film, in theaters. And I thought I would come on here and tell my thoughts and my experiences on the Mandalorian TV series as far back as I could go. I would not say this is a resurrected retros because I do not think fondly of this show any longer. But taking you back 6 years, 2019. We were highly anticipating The Rise of Skywalker, and then out of nowhere, Disney Plus comes out and they release this brand new show from Star Wars called The Mandalorian. Um, and with that show, in the first episode, we get basically a reinvigorated version of this franchise. We see The Mandalorian season one bring back heart, bring back, you know, authenticity, bring back, some. It felt genuine. It felt like it was actually, what's the word I'm looking for? Earnest. It felt earnest, and a part of that was attributed to Baby Yoda. Because that gained a lot of traction. Baby Yoda was obviously a big deal. It became a meme. It transcended the show itself and became a part of the cultural zeitgeist. Maybe the last big thing in the cultural zeitgeist was Baby Yoda. And so, with that, the traction to The Mandalorian came instantly, and goodwill was partially restored in the Star Wars franchise. Season one was, it took itself seriously. Season one maybe wasn't perfect, but it took itself seriously, and it felt like it was a real lived-in world. It felt like Star Wars was a real lived-in world still. Sure, you could argue the Family Guy references, the Family Guy jokes that were in the show were a little bit like a little bit much, but at least it felt like, okay, that's a real thing that real people in the Star Wars universe might actually talk about, might actually say or do. And so, while Baby Yoda as a character fundamentally is more than just, no more than just a prop, it's just a puppet that's not going to talk. He's never going to talk. He's never going to develop as a character. He's just going to be a 50-year-old boomer with a diaper fetish. While The Mandalorian also stayed pretty stagnant. In season one, we introduce him as the Mandalorian, sort of playing off of the Man with No Name, the Clint Eastwood character from Good, Bad, and Ugly movies, the old spaghetti westerns, and the show for the episodes that it was in felt like there was consequences, like there was stakes, there was it felt like there was actual gravity and weight to what was happening, and again, not perfect, but nonetheless fun, earnest, and it won back the fan base. It won back a majority of the fan base with goodwill, in spite of the horrible Disney Star Wars sequels. And so, with that, there was goodwill still installed with The Mandalorian. It took itself seriously. It had the fan base, and it felt like Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni at the time were just allowed to do their thing. It was like, okay, you go out there, you do your thing, and it won people over. It got the fans riled up again. It got the fans interested in the Mandalorian little sector of the Star Wars universe. Now, that goodwill would be very strong to bring in the normies. And here's what I'll say. That with all the normies that came in after the Mandalorian, it's definitely ruined the Star Wars fan base. I'll say that. It brought in women. Now, hey, look, women have liked Star Wars for decades, all the way back to the original trilogy. To the women out there who have liked Star Wars since day one, since the original trilogy, since the prequels, I applaud you. You gals are beautiful. I love you. You are few and far between. You are, diamonds in the rough. That's what you guys are. You are all great women who have been around since day one. The women that have showed up in Disney Star Wars from the sequel trilogy and Baby Yoda are toxic wine moms who try to cancel everybody, and they enjoy all sorts of nonsensical garbage that Lucasfilm is going to spit out, especially things like The Acolyte. That's where you get these Disney shills coming from. They're basically the normies that were attracted by the Mandalorian reactions and all that stuff coming out, and then didn't help that the pandemic of 2020 really elevated the reaction channel movement, and then we got Star Wars becoming a reaction channel thing, and that's where the shills were born. They started doing all the reaction videos. Oh my God, it's the Mandalorian trailer! As they start freaking out and getting access as a result of it, because Jon Favreau really likes watching shills reacting to his work, and now he's losing plot. But on to season two. On to season 2 of The Mandalorian. There's still goodwill. There's still goodwill. There's still a desire for Star Wars at this time. There's still people that want to believe that Star Wars can be saved. They bring back Tamora Morrison as Boba Fett. They cast Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka. They bring in Katie Sackhoff as Bo-Katan. They bring in these old Clone Wars characters and do them in live action to appeal to the Clone Wars people, to appeal to the Clone Wars crowd. And as a result, more goodwill is built up. Now, granted, with hindsight, all those were cheap member-berry cameos that were meant to, win people over and expand the Star Wars universe to the normies. However, it did not work out long term because the Mandalorian did not develop as a character. Din Djarin still did not develop, and he stayed consistently stagnant over the course of 3 whole seasons. And so then we had the incredible finale where Luke Skywalker, or at least someone who looks like Luke Skywalker with deepfakes, shows up to answer Grogu's call to teach him how to become a Jedi. Because clearly Grogu, we find out that Baby Yoda's name is Grogu. I love my aunt's name for him. She called him Grongo. I'm thinking, Grongo's actually probably a better name than Grogu. But he was, a child that survived Order 66. So Luke Skywalker would show up and take him in as his apprentice. There's one problem with that. Sequel trilogy still exists. Sequel trilogy is not being retconned. So does this mean that Baby Yoda is going to get killed by Kylo Ren? There's a lot of questions, a lot of theories. A lot of people are still holding on to hope for Star Wars at this point. They're building theories. The goodwill is there. Luke Skywalker making his epic return at the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian brought the fan base together. It united the fan base in one moment. And just like that, in one moment, the fan base got divided at an instant when Gina Carano, the woman who plays Cara Dune in The Mandalorian, gets fired from Lucasfilm and then let go from the Actors Guild, publicly shamed by Disney, canceled by the cancel pigs online, and then thrown under the bus by the Access Media. With that being said, the fan base divided again. The goodwill that was built up from the end of season 2, gone. All these rumors that were coming out from people like Doomcock and Mike Zero were all about, Civil War at Lucasfilm. Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are wearing MAGA hats, and they're about to go into Lucasfilm and steal everything back, January 6th style from Kathleen Kennedy. Turns out, Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau were lockstep with Kathleen Kennedy. Nobody was coming to the rescue of Lucasfilm. The Empire won. It's over. If you needed further proof, the Book of Boba Fett comes out. And I know that Book of Boba Fett is not a Mandalorian show, but it's basically The Mandalorian Season 2.5 because Book of Boba Fett takes place after Season 2. Mandalorian, Din Djarin shows up in 2 episodes of of Book of Boba Fett, basically to do an episode of The Mandalorian in the Book of Boba Fett, where we find out that Luke Skinwalker, the guy in deepfake that's supposed to be Luke Skywalker, is teaching Baby Yoda, and he's like, I got nothing more to teach him, so he can just go off now. He can fuck off. And so he sends Baby Yoda off into space in an X-Wing by himself, a little toddler, and nothing happens. So we just prove now that the goodwill of having Luke Skywalker show up and be a badass turned out to be a false flag because he just sent a toddler out into space where he could have easily died and trusted him to land on Tatooine to find his surrogate father. Meanwhile, this whole time, you have myself, who I was not considered one way or the other politically, wise at this time. I was just a Star Wars fan. I was just a guy who wanted to have good Star Wars. I was willing to overlook a lot of plot problems, a lot of inconsistencies in Disney Star Wars, because I just wanted good Star Wars. But then I see Gina Carano gets fired from Lucasfilm, and I'm like, why? What did she do that was so horrible? Find out what she did that was so horrible, which was basically compare conservatives to Jews in the Holocaust, which, depending on who you ask, is either a horrible thing or a completely accurate thing, or a wildly accurate thing that actually makes more sense now than it would a couple of years ago, but not for the reasons that you think. I'm not going to get into that. Point is, the fact that she was fired from Lucasfilm for having that opinion, while Pedro Pascal has basically the same opinion from the other perspective, from the leftist perspective, and they didn't fire him at all because he did the same exact thing. Same thing with all the other people at Lucasfilm, from Pablo Hidalgo to Dave Filoni to Leslie Headland to Brian Young. There's so many assholes at Lucasfilm that could have been fired for sharing their opinions online. But instead, it was Gina Carano, because it wasn't that she shared her opinion, it was the opinion that she shared. And I think that was the moment that truly radicalized me, to make me become a YouTuber, to kind of, elevate me to this position that I'm at now, to make me apathetic about Disney Star Wars, is because I was like, you know what, okay, they fired Gina, but maybe Book of Boba Fett will be good. I was wrong. And then I thought maybe that the Book of Boba Fett would retcon the sequels. I was wrong. And then we got season 3 of The Mandalorian, the pinnacle, the absolute centerpiece of failure that was The Mandalorian, where the show just devolved into absolute laziness. You can chalk it up as the Book of Boba Fett being a show that Jon Favreau shit out while he was on an airplane flying to go make a different movie. And you can chop it up to incompetence. You could just say that, he didn't care enough about the Book of Boba Fett to make it good. It wasn't made out of spite. That's fine. You could say the same thing about the sequel trilogy. Maybe Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams aren't, dickheads enough to make it spiteful. Fine. You can make that argument. Obi-Wan Kenobi was definitely made out of spite in order to rage bait people and essentially alienate the fan base even further, in spite of their attempts to make people watch the show. At that point, The Mandalorian Season 3 fell into the same trap. Jon Favreau was working on The Mandalorian Season 3, and what happened? He did the exact same thing that he did with the Book of Boba Fett. He made all the characters clowns. He ruined the story by making it all about Bo-Katan and taking away any agency from Din Djarin. Grogu, we find out, is not going to grow up. He's not going to become a Jedi. He's not going to do anything other than do cute little baby noises and go, eat a fucking fish, egg or something and wipe him out, because he's basically a genocidal maniac now. He tried to eat the last of a fish people's eggs. And so, as a result, Baby Yoda's never going to evolve. Din Djarin's never going to evolve. Every piece of goodwill from the first 2 seasons is gone now. And so, what's left? You factor in Ahsoka and how shit that series actually was. The whole Mandoverse, the Dave Filoni Mandoverse, has been a complete failure since, you could argue, season 2 of The Mandalorian, but more so when they fired Gina Carano. Not saying that Gina Carano was the direct cause for the downfall of Lucasfilm. They were always going to fail. Gina Carano being there or not, that was always going to happen. But that was the singular moment where people like me got radicalized, where people like me were aware of what Lucasfilm was doing, and were aware of what Lucasfilm was, how they feel about the fans and how they feel about the normies and people who have enjoyed Star Wars for decades. And as a result, the apathy is strong with this one. It's hard to see that the Mandalorian and Grogu movie is going to somehow be successful. If this movie came out 2020, 2021, even in 2022, it could have been successful. It could have at least made a ton of money. But there's been so much bad PR, so much bad will from the fans, and so many disappointed people from just the normie standpoint at this point, that now Star Wars has lost 2 whole generations of fans. They can't. This is not going to be successful. Season 3 was such a clown show. I don't even know where to begin on how to explain just how shit it was. But while it may have not undone everything the same way that Book of Boba Fett's 2 episodes undid the finale of Season 2 of The Mandalorian, but it doesn't progress anything. You have Jack Black and Lizzo show up for no reason whatsoever, and you have a Christopher Lloyd character that basically is a separatist wearing Confederate clothing and doing the CIS will rise again. It was so funny. That show became a fucking joke. It became a joke. Everything that was earnest and heartfelt about season 1 and what people enjoyed about the show became a Monty Python skit in Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian season 3. The show lost all of its spirit. It lost all of its heart. It lost all of its, earnesty. It became disingenuous. It became typical Disney Star Wars, typical modern day woke Lucasfilm. And at the end of the day, the Mandalorian and Grogu movie is not going to be successful. This is just, I think it's going to be a TV episode turned into a movie, or maybe 2 episodes turned into a movie. We're supposed to get season 4 of The Mandalorian, but I don't think anybody's going to care. I think this is a desperate attempt to win fans back, and it's just not going to work. And I just find it funny. I find it enjoyable. I get a kick out of this. That Gina Carano's comeback fight against Ronda Rousey just last Saturday became more talked about, more streamed, and more important to the cultural zeitgeist than the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, the first movie that Star Wars has had since 2019. The first movie in like 6 years. Disney Star Wars is a joke. Dave Filoni is a joke. The Mandalorian is a joke. And it's basically a waste of time. Watching it now, I turned on season 1 just to be like, okay, what was it like? What were the olden days like? And all I can tell you is, man, there used to be some authenticity. It's gone now. And it's not going to survive. But that has been the downfall of The Mandalorian. But let me know what y'all think in the comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe. Let me know what y'all think about, my view on this and my perspective. Because I don't think The Mandalorian and Grogu is going to put a dent in Lucasfilm's problems. And it's not going to save Star Wars. It's not even going to be successful. The Mandalorian is a dead franchise. Confirmed. So, I will talk to y'all in another video very soon.